So a little overview of ISEP, and hang tight if you already know this stuff. I'll leave plenty of time at the end for some questions and kind of to talk through any individual situations you have. Oops. So I like to start with big picture, talking about why study abroad. Oh, Alexis. Hi, Alexis. I'm just getting started here. Welcome. So why study abroad? There's a lot of reasons, right? And everyone has their own personal reasons, but some things to think about beyond just traveling to a new place and having exciting new experiences is really that immersion and language skills aspect. And that's something that ISEP takes really seriously. We want you to do more than just be a tourist somewhere, right? We want you to really experience the culture firsthand and be immersed in that community so that you can contribute to that community, and also so that you get a really rich perspective of that place that's beyond just hopping on a plane, visiting, and leaving again. So ISEP really values that, and that's why all of our programs, you'll be directly enrolled in the university. So it's different from some other study abroad programs where maybe you'll be on sort of a satellite campus and your teachers will be American and your fellow students might also be American. Your teachers or your professors will always be with ISEP from that particular university. And most of the time you'll be in courses with maybe some other Americans, but other international students and other domestic students as well. And then another thing I like to point out that students sometimes don't think about is that study abroad really boosts your career opportunities. If you're competing with other folks for a position post-graduation and you have study abroad on your resume, that's going to really stand out to employers, especially if you know how to talk about your study abroad experience and market it. So we have a lot of resources for alumni once you return on how to market yourself. You know, I've lived abroad, I've handled difficult situations and logistics, or maybe I speak a second language, I'm interculturally competent. So those are things I think we don't always think about, but it really helps you stand apart from the crowd. And then, why ISEP? So there's three main things I like to point out that I think ISEP is really unique with, and I know that there's a ton of providers to choose from, but one of the main things about ISEP is that we try and be as affordable as possible. So we don't want finances to be a barrier keeping you from study abroad. So I'll get into some scholarships as well as our exchange model, which for many students will be the cheapest way to study abroad. And then accessibility. So we have, actually this is outdated, we have probably about close to 200 institutions internationally now outside the US to choose from, and actually closer to 60 countries. And I'll also share a little bit about how we offer a lot of programs in non-traditional destinations. And then the last one is immersive, which I talked about earlier, but just the experience to live like a local, we like to say. So where can I go? 60 countries across the globe, including some really unique ones. So whether you're interested in somewhere like Malaysia, Fiji, Ghana, Botswana, Morocco, Lebanon, we have a lot of program offerings. And for a lot of students, they're interested in, you know, Western Europe and Australia, New Zealand, but then there's a lot of opportunities for students that are sort of interested in going outside that box. When can I go? So there's a lot of flexibility here as well. You can go spring or fall or both. Sometimes students study someplace in the fall and then another place in the spring. We also have several summer programs that vary from 4 to 8 weeks. And then we also have full year programs. And then the third one I like to touch on is what can I study? A lot of times nursing students, STEM students, business students feel, I mean, David, kind of like what you were saying, your department might not be pushing you to study abroad, or they might say, oh, you know what, that's too tricky for you. And that's kind of one of the myths of study abroad, is that if you're in one of these majors, especially STEM, then study abroad is out for you. And that's really often not true. It might mean you need to do a little more research. It might mean you need to get special approval from your department. But I've really rarely come across a major where a student is unable to study abroad just because of their major. So we like to encourage all students to look into our options and not be discouraged by their major and maybe their department steering them away. So we have two kinds of study abroad programs, and this is where some questions might come up. So let me know, feel free to enter the chat at any time or raise your hand. So we have ISEP Exchange and ISEP Direct. ISEP Exchange is unique to ISEP, and you won't see this option with other study abroad programs. The cool thing about ISEP Exchange is that you're paying your university fees. So you'll pay whatever you typically pay for tuition at Utah State, along with typical housing and meals package at USU. So that means if you get FAFSA or other federal aid, if you get state aid and some institutional aid, depends on the particular scholarship, but that usually goes with you abroad. So for many students, this is going to be by far the most affordable option. The exception would be if you're an out-of-state student or if you're not receiving any aid, then the direct options, which I'll talk about in a moment, might make more sense. But your financial aid transfers, as I said, and then your credits also come back as USU credits. So they won't come back as transfer credits, which is also a plus.
Emily, sorry, I didn't see a hand raise thing.
Oh yeah, no problem.
With the ISEP Exchange, does this cancel out differential tuition for the business school or like engineering school, stuff like that? Would it just be the base state tuition that you'd be paying?
Yeah, so I can address that. Yes, basically it would be, because ISEP is considered a non-business exchange, and so we have a differential allowance. I believe it's up to 6 credits of the highest differential tuition, which is undergrad business. So you would pay that as a program fee, but it's not the full business differential tuition that you would typically pay.
Okay, great. Thank you, Monica.
Mm-hmm.
So a few more things about exchange. The plus of exchange, right, is those things I just mentioned. And one thing that's required of this is that you have a little bit of flexibility in where you go. So students will list up to 10 universities on their application, and they'll get placed in one of those. And our goal at ISEP is to place as many students at one of their top institutions as possible. But the way exchange works is as a university will send however many students out on exchange. So say USU sends 5 students out. That means they can accept more or less 5 inbound students. So this means that, you know, if 50 students apply to USU, they won't all get in. So that means they might be placed at another university on their list. So we ask students when they're choosing universities to list several so that they are placed in one of them. And on our website, when you click on each of the universities, it'll say the chance of placement. And that basically means how competitive is this site and how much space do they have. So we encourage students to list at least one site with a good or better chance of placement. So some of them will say excellent, good, competitive, very competitive. So we want you to list a range in there so that you have some options. If there is a site that you're like, I know I want to go here, they have the exact academics I want, this is the only place I want to go, we suggest applying on ISEP Direct, which is the second option here. The difference in funding is that you pay that particular university's tuition and insurance, and you pay it to ISEP. So for exchange, you're paying USU as normal, and for direct, you're paying ISEP, and that cost varies program to program. Sometimes this might be a cheaper option if you're an out-of-state student, or if you're receiving aid, or you're not receiving aid rather. You might find a direct program for, we have direct programs as low as $7,000, $8,000. That might make more sense for you, but sometimes it might be more expensive. So that's kind of up to you to assess. It's a good idea to visit your financial aid office if you're not exactly sure the package you're receiving. Most aid does transfer, but something like FAFSA won't. And then the plus of direct is that you get guaranteed placement. So unlike exchange, where you have this list and you need a little bit of flexibility in terms of where you go, for direct, as long as you meet the minimum requirements and apply by the deadline, you're in. So there's no exchange space. There's no limitation on space. It's kind of like applying to a university where, you know, as long as you meet their requirements, you're in. So I advise that to students that maybe have really strict academic requirements or are just super set on one location. You know, we try and encourage students to be flexible. That's part of the awesome thing about study abroad is you really are stretched like that. But oftentimes students, for one reason or another, just have one destination. Internships and service learning, so I'll just go over this quickly, but we do have opportunities for full-time and part-time internships, as well as volunteer and service learning opportunities. We have a couple of virtual options, and then obviously in-person, granted COVID things die down in the spring. We have a cool new virtual service learning program in Barcelona, and that is kind of our newest one. You get placed at an organization and you're working closely with that Spanish organization in several different fields, but it's all remote, which is pretty awesome. And one of the other options I like to highlight is the study and intern. So this means you get placed at a university, but then you also, so you'll be taking maybe 1 to 2 classes at the university and then be interning 10 to 20 hours a week. So that's a cool option if you're like, I want the academic experience, but I also maybe want to be involved in the community or see what the workforce is like in that particular place. That's something I'd recommend. Scholarships. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just want to highlight, as I mentioned in the beginning, ISEP is super focused on affordability. So we have a number of internal scholarships and we highlight a number of external scholarships on our website. And then I know it's such a strange time for all of us, right, with COVID, because there's only so much ISEP can guarantee as far as what programs will run, what won't run. We have high hopes for spring and even higher hopes for next fall, but we just don't know what's going to happen. So we created the ISEP Promise this summer, which is basically a risk-free policy for you when you're applying to study abroad. So in the event that a travel warning goes up, or your host university or USU cancels programs, we'll do a couple things. First, we'll try and offer you another placement at another university. If that doesn't work, we'll offer the option for you to defer, which basically means just waiting a semester and going the next semester, which is not ideal, but a lot of students have been doing that this fall, for example. And then if neither of those work, we'll provide you a refund of your program placement fee, which is $395 that you pay to ISEP. We're super committed to your safety. So if we find out that a place is no longer safe or that you won't be able to get a visa in time, we'll alert you of that as soon as possible. And we're staying super up to date on all of our sites. So if a program is open and you're able to apply for it, go for it. The one thing you won't get back is a $100 application fee, which is basically the fee for us to process your application. But like I said, oftentimes we're able to defer a student or find them another site. So all hope is not lost if your initial site is canceled, let's say for this spring. Okay. So couple options for how to connect with us. Feel free to write these down and I'll enter my email in the chat in a second here too. The best thing to do if you're interested in ISEP is to create an account. This is no cost and no pressure. It'll basically connect you with an ISEP advisor. We have ISEP advisors for every region that we send students to. So I'm kind of your overall contact and you're always welcome to contact me with any questions. But let's say you have specific questions about South Korea or Ghana or any country, the person that will best be able to answer that is the advisor for that region. So if you create an account with ISEP, which I'll also put the link in the chat, then you'll be able to connect with that advisor and have your really specific questions answered. So again, write any of this down, and I'll enter some details in the chat as well. Like I said, the first thing to do is to create an account so you can meet with a study abroad advisor, and then from there you can start your application. So creating an account just kind of gets you started and gets you in our system and looped in, and then you can decide what makes most sense for you. Thanks so much for listening. I think we